All right, morning everyone. I'm Jerry Creekbaum with Expedition Communications, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about business continuity, and specifically we're going to shift gears a little bit and go from fiber to satellite communications from a business continuity perspective. Just quickly, a little bit about our company. Expedition Communications has been around for about 12 years. We're primarily a services company, providing support to telcos such as many of you in the room today. We've supported a little over 20,000 remote installations today and counting, with over 500 customers. So we've got a pretty big user base, pretty massive installation crew and support crew. One of the things that sort of differentiates us from a lot of the competition is our ability to move quickly. We support any number of customers, not just satellite services, but router installations and things of that nature. So today, again, I wanted to talk a little bit about business continuity and the focus on business continuity for communications in general, right? To see how that can be better improved, for customers throughout the Caribbean and Latin America. So one of the things that I just wanted to start the presentation off with a little short video, stressing some of the importance of business continuity and planning for your network environment. So if we watch a real quick short video here to kind of give you a sense of what we're talking about. This example video is just here recently, the earthquakes in Puerto Rico. So just real quick video sort of highlighting, in this case, it's a reactive approach. There were 3 communities in the south part of the island that were affected, seriously affected by the earthquake. And we dropped in some satellite services because there were no communications at those refugee camps. But the point of this video is really sort of highlighting, all right, this is a reactive approach, but what could be done from a proactive solution where you installed satellite systems into your business proactively to prepare for any number of outages, right? Outages come in many different forms. Some of the previous speakers here were talking about some of the challenges with fiber, right? But also not just the transoceanic fiber, but in some of the terrestrial environments, you have a situation where many of the cell towers, central offices are all fed from some of the similar networks. So what we're going to be really discussing here today is sort of the benefit of satellite to leapfrog around those problem areas. So what is a disaster? So we all know the Big Bang events, hurricanes, earthquakes, and things of that nature. But we're also right in the midst of potential pandemics as well. If you look at the coronavirus and some of the effects in China, there are many workers that are just unable to go into the office, right, because of the environment that they're in. But it's not just natural disasters. There's also man-made disasters. Construction, big around the island here, not just in Puerto Rico, but everywhere in the U.S. And throughout Latin America. You can also take a look at some of the infrastructure. Take, for example, Sacramento, just not too long ago around Christmas, there was a single car accident that took down a key utility pole for a major telecom carrier in the U.S. That particular point was so critical that it took out all the communications at the airport for those customers, whether they were on fiber or on cellular connectivity. And we had a few customers at the airport that were leveraging satellite communications, and they were able to continue operation and continue checking people into the airlines, where a lot of the terrestrial services just were unavailable at the time. So it's just small things like that that you take for granted these days can have a big impact on your overall network. So, as sort of I mentioned, regardless of the type of event that's going on, business continuity needs to be in your plan and prepared for that eventual reality. So, what is business continuity? Basically, we're talking about staying connected. In today's world, most of the businesses, retail environments, they're highly dependent on a real-time connected network. If you take a look at some of the cloud-based services, some of the credit card authorizations today, we're pretty much a cashless environment, right? Everybody is using a credit card to process payments. If that network goes down, you can no longer process those payments. You can no longer connect to some of your cloud resources for inventory control and things of that nature. And then, of course, we've all sort of adopted voice over IP. Again, that's a real-time network solution, right? Without connectivity, your business just stops. So basically, again, we want to be proactive. We want to look at business continuity as a holistic view and then dive deeper into that. So a couple points that are probably worth noting. Many of you in the business continuity arena, you may know some of these numbers, but according to FEMA, 40% of small businesses after a disaster will not reopen if they lose connectivity. And of the ones that do reopen, 25% of those fail within a year. It really stresses the point of how important that network connection is to the small business. And then, from a bigger picture view, 75% of the businesses without a business continuity plan fail within the 3-year environment after that event. So again, it's something that we wanted to stress, to the users today, the importance of business continuity into your network planning. So again, some of the common missteps we see out there, just doing this over a number of years. Some of the biggest mistakes we see are customers actually installing a similar technology for their backup, right? You've got a primary carrier going into a business for service. Sometimes you'll see businesses actually select another telco or another traditional provider for a secondary fiber path. More often than not, unless you're talking about a pretty large data center, it's very difficult to actually get a true diverse secondary path into most businesses. Most of the route paths are shared resources, so it's a common conduit, common trench, providing services for both primary and secondary. The ones that do leverage cellular, for example, for a secondary path, that cellular service is really only diverse for that last mile. Once you get back to the tower, it's oftentimes going back into some of the same fiber network, same central offices as what the primary network was. So, we just want to bring out some awareness to the end users and the customers is just, think about that business continuity. Think about what you're putting in as a, well thought out plan for business continuity. And one of the things that we're really going to talk about here today is on the satellite side of things, how that can overcome some of these challenges that you see here. All right, so, beating the odds, right? And that's what we're going to be talking about with satellite services. So 35% of the companies without backup connectivity lose access to at least one business critical applications. So again, we're talking about voice over IP, point of sale, inventory management. Most of the big box retailers today are just-in-time inventory. One of the largest retailers in the U.S., they actually replenish their stores twice a day. So that every time you check out, they're actually processing that back office inventory system to be able to have that item shipped back to the store, because they don't keep any stock in the store. So again, that criticality is really there from a business continuity standpoint. So making the case for satellite, right? So, it's not like your traditional satellite. I've been doing this for 36 years, focusing just on satellite communications, and more specifically, just on the business continuity aspect of satellite. So most of the satellites, common misconceptions are that it's slow, it's high latency. It is true that there is some latency with satellite communications, but there's some techniques that are built into the satellite services today that provide WAN acceleration, right, that mitigate that latency. And we're not talking about slow speeds like in the past where it was just point of sale transaction based, right? The systems that we sell today are 25 megabits down, 3 megabits up, and that's a conservative number. Realistically, we see speeds that are significantly higher than that. Availability is still very high with some of the newer techniques. Some of the satellite differences on some of the new technology today is it's much more like a cellular network when you look at the footprint. In years past, a satellite connection used to be a complete hemispheric beam, right? Then they brought it down to a continent or a U.S. style coverage area. Now these beams are actually very condensed, very powerful, that are 50 to 150 miles wide. So they're very focused beams with much higher frequency reuse, which allows us to do much higher data rates than what you've seen in the past. And again, when we look at just that cloud connectivity, one of the big advantages for satellite in an island nation like Puerto Rico and some of the Caribbean is the ability to sort of leapfrog off island, right? So your diversity from a satellite perspective is on the rooftop. So you've got a diverse point of entry into the building, leapfrog off the island to a diverse gateway, in our case in the US, where you get back into the internet through a diverse tier 1 internet provider. And so I sort of hit on some of these key points already, but the key benefits, again, diverse point of entry, diverse network connections where you're going off island. It's a self-healing network. So even when we look at our ground station in the US, that's actually multiple earth stations, much like some of the conversations today on the fiber network being self-healing and being able to accommodate an outage. The system actually will route from one gateway to the next based on the environment at that local earth station. Fewer hops. So again, we're making one single hop to the US, and then you're able to get to cloud services such as AWS, Microsoft Azure, or go into your back office data center that may be here on island, or it could be back in the US. And then no local infrastructure dependency. Another point I like to emphasize is not all earthquakes or not all events, hurricanes are the same. You take, for example, Hurricane Sandy in New York. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't the storm that actually caused the most damage. It was the flooding of the central offices. So in the case of Hurricane Sandy, there were 7 central offices in downtown New York that were flooded because most of them were in basements. And everything fed into those central offices. Cellular networks fed into it, fiber networks fed into it, copper plants. It was devastating. But satellite communications was able to maintain connectivity for the customers that had that capability in their business continuity plan. And then, I'd like to just sort of give you the numbers, and this is a typical small business, right? The cost of an outage is actually pretty staggering. If you look at what a typical business makes, you divide that up into the hours of business operation, it roughly comes out to about $900 a minute that the business is down in potential lost revenue. So that's basically about 50 grand per hour that you're looking at. Many businesses are higher than this. Some of them are lower, right? It just depends on the size of the business. But these are some very impactful numbers of the importance of a business continuity plan for your business. And just a few more statistics. When we look at the cost of downtime, it's not just from one source, right? So USA Today reports the average is about 50,000. That matches up with what we see in some of our calculations and some of the customers that we talk about. And then the typical expense for a customer in general every year is about $164,000 a year based on outages. If you want to look at the percentages, 59% of the Fortune 500 customers report 1.5 hours of downtime each week. These numbers are staggering. We just don't realize there's that much impact going on with the customers' networks. And then 3% of the companies affected by a disaster reported 100% uptime. So only 3% of customers actually were unaffected by an outage. So that really tells you how many people are missing the boat when it comes to business continuity. So just wanted to go through sort of a quick case study of one of the customers that we've recently installed. It was a large U.S. retailer, 5,500 locations. And I mentioned earlier that the importance of that just-in-time inventory to some of these larger retailers, right? Their big challenge is they had a primary connection via fiber. They had secondary connections via cellular network, and they were still experiencing significant outages. We designed a solution based on satellite communications to overcome some of those challenges. It's something that is very quickly rolled out. It didn't take much time at all. We were several months ahead of schedule. And today, that initial rollout of 5,500 sites was performed, but we're still bringing in new sites as they open new stores at a rate about 25 to 30 a month. So the other point I wanted to really make about that particular customer is in that retail market, they're extremely cost sensitive to price, right? But the value that satellite brought to the table was significant enough for them to actually cost justify it, going back to some of that outage cost, right? How much did an hour of outage cost them in business, lost opportunities? It was a very, very easy case to justify the benefits of business continuity. And in conclusion, I just wanted to go over some of those key points again. So lack of planning does hurt a business. We see this every day in and out. And it's not just the lack of business continuity, it's over and over again what we see out there is customers thinking they're protected, and the solution that they've installed just did not provide the level of business continuity they were looking for. I've got an example of one customer that when we were going through a renewal process, they were actually looking to turn down their satellite service. We were able to show them, because they were using satellite as a tertiary connection. So they had fiber, cellular, and then satellite. They wanted to just leave it as two connections, fiber and cellular. We were actually able to show them how often they were using satellite, and they were surprised. They thought that they were leveraging the cellular network. They thought that service was working and they didn't need satellite communications. But with a properly designed network, you never really realize you're down, right? That's the goal, is to have it just seamlessly switch from one technology to the next to maintain that uptime that you're looking for. The other piece is just sort of streamlining the providers, right? It goes in the same line of conversation on seamless operation, right? That you want to maintain that connectivity. You want a service provider that's going to be able to see your primary network, your secondary, your tertiary, so that you can design that holistic network. Finally, just partner with the best of breed out there. Take a look at your options. Don't just look at what you know. Open your horizons and look for some alternate technology, because satellite, while it's known as a legacy technology, it's not the same as it used to be. There's some real advances in satellite communications that are pretty impressive. And with that, I'll go ahead and yield my time back. And if there's anybody that would like to sort of discuss satellite communications in a little bit more detail, we're right outside the hall doors. All right, thank you very much.